Hello and welcome again to another edition of the Bruce and Bob Show. Bob Mueller with News 2. Bruce Doby, Nashville media entrepreneur, coming to you from Jimmy Kelly's Steakhouse, famous here in downtown Nashville, talking politics. Had a good week?
Great week. Good week.
Interesting. We can't get away from talking about bathrooms. Again, we thought we were done with this issue for the year here in Tennessee as the proposed legislation on a bathroom bill here has been put off until next year. But now, President issues guidelines nationally. That's bringing up discussion here in Tennessee about a possible special session. A little bit later, we're going to be talking with State Senator Kerry Roberts out of Springfield to talk about whether that's going to happen, what would be accomplished. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But we can't get rid of this issue.
Such a strange issue and a bizarre issue, and I rarely find myself in agreement with National Review, nor do I read National Review that much, but they make the quite legitimate point. Here we are as a nation, $20 trillion in debt, having fought foreign wars now for 10 years, with an alienated public that wants to lynch someone over the fact that Congress doesn't do anything, and all we can find ourselves to talk about is bathroom parity or potty parity. And I think this is an example where Barack was ahead of the public. Here I am, a 58-year-old white guy, and granted, we can deconstruct me all I want, but I'm not sure I understand what's going on.
Well, and not to disparage anyone on either side, but is this one of those issues? Because of maybe one incident, this is a solution looking for a problem.
Correct.
Was there a problem that existed out there? And maybe there was.
Yeah, and if it is a problem, there are greater problems out there that surely have much more to do with the destiny and future of this great nation than this particular item. Issue. Bizarre all the way you look at it.
We're talking about this kind of issue, and this is exactly, as you mentioned, the kind of thing that we're seeing in the electorate, why they're so upset with what's going on in Washington, why they're so supportive of Donald Trump and his outsider campaign, Bernie Sanders on the Democratic side. You saw his crowds in Oregon the other night, 30,000 people at this event. She's still not going to get the nomination wrapped up. People are angry. They're angry at the system. They want to be represented or at least be heard, and they feel like they're not being heard.
And on this bathroom measure, I mean, there's this great, and this, because of what you're saying, there's this great disconnect between the educated elite urban audience in America and the more rural, less educated, middle class, sometimes working class, sometimes struggling audience in America. Just a vast gulf there. And you see that rural side, really siding with Trump strongly, and the other insider side really being sort of snooty and looking down their noses at that more populist segment of the audience.
Well, Kerry might have an idea of an answer if there is a solution here, but it seems to me the problem is, regardless of which side you're on this issue, it's no, we're going to stop them, no, we're going to infiltrate them, as opposed to let's find a solution. Can we find a family bathroom, whatever it is? No one wants to accommodate, everyone wants to dictate.
There was no conversation about this and no education by Barack Obama to the United States and with voters in America about what this means and what this does. I'm still playing catch up. I think I'm an educated voter, but I'm still playing catch up on this, so homework not done.
National election, obviously the biggest story going on. A new poll came out just this week, first poll I've seen where Donald Trump beats Hillary Clinton. She's got problems. His momentum continues to be strong. His backers continue to be excited. In Tennessee, he won by 15 points. And yet here in Tennessee, there's still a little bit of a lack of open support. We're hearing some discussions. We'll talk to Kerry about that, how that's going to translate once the general election happens. But if the Democrats don't do something, and a general election really is different than a primary election. It really is a different animal. It looks like the attack they're taking is they believe, and to some degree they're right, a lot of people aren't engaged yet. A lot of people still aren't in the process. And when they see this $130 million super PAC buy that just regurgitates all the negative things Donald Trump said, that will be the impetus to get the Democrats excited. What do you think?
Well, I think Hillary's got real problems right here today. And so we can talk about what happens in 3 months. But she can't put away the crazy uncle in the attic who's a socialist and a gray-haired, wild, frizzed-out guy who's a socialist.
She barely won Kentucky.
Barely won Kentucky. And so she's got to put him away first. This guy's vowing to go all the way to the convention. This is her worst nightmare. And that audience that he has carved out may be so alienated that they go elsewhere in the general. That's number one. Number two, man, I don't put anything past this guy. He dominates every news cycle.
Yes, he does.
He dominated yesterday with his discussion of who he put on the Supreme Court.
Brilliant.
And three, when he goes after her hugely in these debates, as he laid waste to 16 other candidates, who knows what will happen. So I tend to think she'll pull this out because of her support among females, and chromosomes are strong, strong here, but who knows?
Well, a couple things, and math has been thrown out for this election, but it is true. Donald Trump has won about 47% of 28% of the electorate. There's still a lot of people out there, so it's still fair game. On the other hand, her people keep saying it's good for the primary to go on. They're trying to say it with a straight face.
Yeah.
They know it's wrong. This is hurting Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, this needs to stop, and it needs to stop now. And Obama said that 2 months ago, and it keeps going on. And it's just this drip, drip, drip of slow and steady attacks on her by her crazy socialist opponent, and it's not good for the Democratic
Spring
Party.
State Senator Kerry Robertson. Kerry from Springfield has been on my show this week with Bob Mueller many times. Conservative in Nashville, well represented. Lost your seat, regained your seat. You obviously have a nice following. Nice for you to join us here. Appreciate it very much.
Welcome, Senator.
Glad to be here.
Let's talk first a little bit about what's going on nationally with the Trump campaign. We've talked about this on my show. As you're conservative, there's no doubt about that. I'm guessing, and I'm not putting words in your mouth, that you were not a Trump person to begin with. So, can you be a Trump person? Can you get past whatever there is that you don't like about him? Is there enough that you do like about him that you believe will move the party forward?
Well, I'll say it wasn't so much that I wasn't a Trump person as much as it was I thought his 15 minutes of fame would be over. And, as we came back month after month and taped the show, I just kept scratching my head thinking,
when does this end?
He's defied every prediction that we made. So, but I've steadfastly said that I would support the Republican nominee, and unless there's just some kind of shenanigans I can't even imagine at the convention, he's going to be the nominee, and I'll support him. I think probably the reluctance of some of the real conservatives or some of the traditional party people to jump on board is their way of making a statement. But I think before they reach a critical point, they get on board. That's my guess. But the thing about it is, Trump has defied all of our expectations. He's defied all the logic. I wouldn't put it past him before this thing is over. You mentioned, the women's vote for Hillary, of course, how he's offended a lot of Hispanics. Wouldn't it just be like Trump before this thing is over to win over the women and win over the Hispanics? The guy has pulled rabbits out of the hat that we didn't expect that he could do. So all I can say is this is going to be the most interesting and entertaining and frustrating election that we've ever seen in our lifetime.
Tell me about the people in you. You represent a rural district. Tell me about, and we talked about this, you heard our conversation about the educated, urban, affluent, urban folks, city folks, versus those rural, more working class, less educated people. Tell me about their needs and concerns and how they look at this presidential election.
Well, I think the people who, we have the stereotype, of course, that the people who are kind of in, the intellectually elite, so to speak, that we would
like
refer
Bob.
to. Yeah, like Bob, yeah.
Hardly. State school.
Those people, one of you made the comment about, looking down their nose at Trump, and you definitely see that.
Yeah.
The rural people who we tend to stereotype as maybe more blue collar, definitely see him in a different light because he's not establishment. And I think people are I was at a meeting the other day and somebody asked a candidate, tell me why you're going to be different than anybody else we've sent to Washington. Given enough time, you'll be just like everybody else we sent there. Well, if there's one thing true about Donald Trump that I think all of us believe, if he gets elected, he's not going to go to Washington and change. He's going to be Donald Trump. And there's a truth in advertising here that what you see is what you get. And I think maybe on some level, that's what's appealing to people is they don't believe that he'll go to Washington and Washington will change him. Now, do they know who he is today? That's a whole separate discussion.
Yeah.
What politicians say usually comes back at some point either to help them or to haunt them.
Right.
He's had negative comments. You can agree or disagree with what he says. It doesn't seem to have affected his base by any stretch of the imagination. Does it concern you, though, that the language he used early on in the campaign, he has toned it down a little bit? He has slid a little bit more to the center, that those kinds of references are insulting to some people, are hurtful to some people? Or is he a big enough figure that he's able to maybe get around that and get past that, and it really doesn't matter?
Well, that's the big question.
Yep.
Because sometimes people, someone will say something that they don't like, but they admire the fact that you know where you stand with that person, for example. So you don't really like the way they presented things, but you like the fact that you know where they stand. I don't know. I guess I'm out of the business now of predicting where Donald Trump's going to go or what he's going to do, because I've definitely been wrong to this point. But if there's ever anybody that could recover from the things that he said,
I agree
it's
with
him.
you on that.
You know, we talk about, we think back years ago, the Teflon presidency. I mean, this guy's taken this to a whole new level, where he manages to say things and they don't stick. And for him to come back with polling data, recent polling data that improves his position is really pretty amazing. So I just think this election, we're not going to know the outcome until it's over. And I know there's a lot of electoral math that people go through that say, well, Hillary has a better shot at this than Trump does. But I think he's just going to continue to defy the odds.
Hey, let's talk about this bathroom stuff for a
Yes,
second.
okay.
Almost bathrooms as metaphor for
Right.
culture. Bob
But the
reported.
whole year on this issue, haven't we?
Well, Bob broke the story last night that you all are thinking of a special session to look into this whole thing. And again, going back to the people in your district, talk to me about what resonates there when they hear President Obama say what he said, his directive about transgenders being able to use.
Well, sure.
The
When you
restrooms.
look at the kind of classic red and blue map of the United States, where you see all this expansive red, and then you see in the urban areas and
Right.
the coastal areas, you see blue. People that live in the red, and again, it's just a big generalization, the response is, go to the bathroom that matches your biology. Now, from a legislative standpoint, here's the issue. There are two kinds of bills out there. One bill out there says you have a right to go to a bathroom if you're transgender, and another bill would say the opposite. One lets you in, one keeps you out. But the problem is this. The problem is a court has not defined what constitutes a transgender individual. You mentioned National Review. They pointed this out in one of their articles, that the problem is right now, the advocate's definition is, if you think you are, you are. That's not the legal definition. So if we pass a law that says, if you think you are, you can, it's tantamount to passing a law that says anyone can go to any bathroom at any time based on what they feel. And if you pass a law that does that, you create a legal defense for someone who simply poses as a transgender to have access to the facilities of the opposite sex. Therein lies the problem. We pass a lot of laws that have unintended consequences, and if you pass a law like that, where there is no litmus test as to who's transgender and who's not, it's just based on a feeling, you've created a legal
Who
defense.
sets the litmus test? How do we determine?
Well, that's going to be where you've got the attorney generals, and in particular Texas, Oklahoma, and West Virginia, who've written this basically scathing letter to the Obama administration saying, you've got a directive here, and you've never defined what constitutes transgender. And until you define what that is, how in the world can we do this? And if we're going to apply this to bathrooms, in Title IX, why are we not talking about sports? Why are we not anything else that's based on, so are we talking about gender, or are we talking about sex? Because I think the advocates have basically said these are two separate things. So there's a lot of there's a lot of things that have to be answered legally, because at the end of the day, what we codify into law is going to be how a court rules on these things.
So you see a special session coming?
I don't know. I believe, I guess my personal opinion is, I did talk to Glenn Cassidy yesterday. I think that if the Attorney General and the Governor move forward, I don't think you'll see a special session. I think if you see a reluctance on their part to do anything, I think you'll see a push for a special session. The problem is, it takes, 2/3 of both bodies
Yes.
to call for a special session, and that's a pretty high bar to be reached. I would like to see the Attorney General and the Governor take the lead on it, and there's no need for a special session.
state lawmaker called this, Susan Lynn called this a mental disorder. Is this an issue, though, that we don't want to go there? Is this an issue that needs to be solved because transgender folks, real and supposed, are part of the community?
The problem is that a lot of people, especially lawmakers, have lost confidence in the American Psychiatric Association definition of these things. So they operate under what we call the DSM, which is their diagnostic manual for disorders. So if we go back prior to October of 2013, the previous DSM referred to it as gender identity disorder,
Yes.
and you could treat that. In other words, you could have reparative therapy, you could align somebody's mind with their biology. Well, when DSM-5 came out, they renamed it to gender dysphoria, and the treatment at that point becomes more, to paraphrase, to oversimplify, is to make somebody feel good about who they think they are. Just a radical departure from how this had been dealt with in previous years. Now the question is, did that change come about because of peer-reviewed research, or did it come about because of political pressure? Well, it came out because of political pressure,
Yes.
not because of... So the question that is a legitimate question, but you get shouted down if you ask this. A legitimate question is someone who's struggling with this, what do they need? Do they need counseling? Do they need accommodation? And the problem is we're answering that question based on politics, not based on research. And that's doing everybody a disservice.
Well, fine, go ahead.
As your public relations advisor, I would encourage you to think that, every national network and every major news publication will immediately book a flight to Nashville to cover this special session. This will be ugly national news. You think North Carolina has been tabloidish headlines? This will be a circus.
The governor didn't discount it, but he kind of said yesterday, I'm not sure what the agenda would be, what the end goal would be.
The other repercussion is the business community is just going to be up in arms over this because it makes us look like a bunch of rubes.
You know what? Here, the one thing that's tough on this is, and this is often true, is trying to understand where the people of Tennessee are on this versus where, like we look. Sometimes there's a great disconnect between the Chamber of Commerce, for example, and what people who live in my district think.
Right.
A very big disconnect, and that also, as you know, exists sometimes between what the media thinks and what the people think. So again, my preference is I think that we deal with this in a proactive
Attorney
way.
General.
And one of the things that I find interesting, I know for a fact I'm one of the few legislators that have an open door policy to transgender people to come to my office. I've met with quite a few, and the one thing that comes to me from them, especially the older ones, is it's not the desire for the bathroom. They've been doing that quietly for years.
Sure.
It's to get the birth certificate changed. So they're larger. We never talked about bathrooms. We always talked about if you had gone through full gender reassignment surgery, could you get your birth certificate changed? That was the legislative request that always came to me in my office. We never discussed bathrooms, and I think the reason why is that they've been going to the bathroom of their appearance for years, and nobody, you may be in a bathroom, and you go, well, that person, looks, and sometimes you can have a transgender person you can't tell, and sometimes you can, and I think people just went about their business and didn't worry about it. But that was the greater concern that came to me. We never had a discussion about bathrooms.
We've been talking about bathrooms since about January, and unfortunately, we're probably going to be talking about some more, especially if there's a special session coming up here in Tennessee. Kerry Roberts, appreciate your time and your insight.
Thanks for coming.
That will do it for another edition of the Burce and Bob Show, coming to you from Jimmy Kelly's Steakhouse. We hope you enjoyed it. Give us some feedback. We'll see you back here next week.